Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to World of Wildlife. It's so good to see everybody here. For those of you that haven't come before, absolutely welcome. You're now part of this community, and I hope you'll be coming on a regular basis. The idea of World of Wildlife is that wildlife lovers around the world get together and we have a chat to each other. We share what we're doing. We learn new things from different people, and our guest speaker today will be Dr. Asia Haines, who is going to be talking about manta rays. We'll also hear from what I've been up to. My name's Dr. Sarah Pai, and I'm the host of this program together with Dr. Wong Suti, who is the director and founder of the Bornean Sun Bear Conservation Centre in Malaysia. So yeah, welcome everybody. There will be more people coming in as we go, I imagine, because we've almost sold out today, which is absolutely awesome. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Where is it? There we go. So there's Wildlife Wong there in the corner, which is the cartoon version of Dr. Wong Suti. And I write Wong's books about Wong. So he and I started this gathering before COVID because it seemed like a lot of people were struggling to link together throughout the world during COVID, and it became a way to connect during that time. So I write books about his adventures with different animals in the rainforest. The first one that I wrote, Saving Sun Bears, is Dr. Wong's biography. It was written as part of my own doctorate and published in 2020. After that, I realized that I really wanted to engage kids in the stories about his adventures with different species. So there are now 6 books in the Wildlife Wong series. So those are all the books are available through bookstores, through libraries, and my website if anyone's interested in having a copy of their own. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an update about what I've been doing. Each of my books includes a story. It includes informational text about the animal and experiments that link back to the story. So since writing the kids' books, I've designed workshops which I take into schools and deliver all sorts of different workshops that connect kids with the environment and nature in a hands-on sort of a fashion. So this month I did a trip together with George, who's here. We drove all the way from where we live at the bottom right-hand corner of that map on the Sunshine Coast. We drove up to Rockhampton, 6 hours away, crossed the Tropic of Capricorn. So you can see the tropic, that they've got a monument at the tropics, so you can put your feet in 2 different, the tropics and the non-tropics. So we headed up to Rockhampton and did 2 visits in schools. I spent time with both a high school and a primary school, working on the differences between narrative writing and informational writing with both of those. And with the high schoolers, we looked at writing their environment and improving their skills in actually using literary techniques to write the environment. So yeah, while I was at one of these schools, they had a petting zoo. So you can imagine I was in heaven at the petting zoo as well, which was pretty cool. So yeah, that's pretty much all I've been doing apart from writing my next book. And I'm going to tell you more about that sometime in the next few months. I'll give you a bit more of a rundown on what's happening there. Needless to say, you will be meeting some of the people I've been interviewing for that book. And one of them is our guest speaker today, Dr. Asia Haines. Now, before we pass over to Asia to tell us all about the amazing undersea world of manta rays, we'll get an update from Dr. Wong and see what's been happening in Borneo, what's happening with the sun bears, and anything else that's going on. Over to you, Wong.
Yeah, okay, good. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us again for this month. I think over the last month, things has been very busy at Borneo right now. And then right now the tourists packing coming back, and June, July is the peak for the traveling seasons, and then every day we have several hundreds of tourists from all over the world visiting us. So things has been busy. And then for me myself, last month I joined a wildlife crime workshop and in Kota Kinabalu, organized by the Sabah Wildlife Departments and also WWF Malaysia. And then I try to, understand the whole situations of combating wildlife crimes. And one of the things that I learned and realized is that it is so difficult for the prosecutors to prosecute anybody who seems like breaking the law, because they need to gather a lot of hard evidence to be able to prosecute them on court. And then so it makes me a little bit frustrating, because obviously this is they are breaking the law, but the authority need to gather sufficient evidence to prove that they are actually breaking the law. It's very, very tedious things. Sometimes is even impossible to prosecute. So at the end, I was thinking, when we do wildlife conservations, education is a must. So we will continue to do our education, try to educate the public about wildlife conservation and so on. And then the second thing is, of course, the law enforcement is extremely important. But first, we need to have very harsh wildlife law, followed by law enforcement, and then followed by prosecution, and finally the judge need to give heavy sentence on the people who are found guilty on breaking the wildlife law. And then given at the whole prosecution process is actually quite challenging, so it makes me realize that we have to depend on option number 3, which is improve local people livelihood, to so that they do not poach, so that they can make a living from the wildlife that in their backyard through nature-based tourism. And that's why nature-based tourism is so important for conservation, and they should work hand on hand. And Boden Samay Conservation Center, it is an example. By establishing in Sabah, we promote nature-based tourism, and hopefully tourist money can support our center. Right now, most of our revenues are coming from the tourist money, and it works really well. And of course, when tourists come here to Sabah, they also visit other places as well. And then when they visit other places, their money are spent on the ground in other places, and so for great jobs, and also improve local people livelihood to a point where the local people realize that wildlife, that running wild, worth money. So we should definitely work towards that directions. Yeah. So that is
It's an
the
important point you're making, Wong, in that if we can change people from being poachers to being tour guides,
absolutely.
that becomes
Yeah, absolutely.
benefit in a different way, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So in order to have a happy wildlife, we need to make sure that the local people are happy. And then and how one way to do that is to nature-based tourism. And then also in order for this whole circle to work, we first must have a government or politician who protect forest and wildlife first. Then it will draw the forest and wildlife, like Sabah right now can draw in tourists, and then tourist money will create jobs and improve local people livelihood. And I always stress to the politician is that, hey, guess what happened in the next election, right? Of course, they will vote for governments who will protect wildlife, protect forests, and then improve their livelihood. But the governments need to do that protections of the wildlife and the forest first. Then it can go into the positive feedback loop and getting better and better. If not, it will go to the directions of the negative feedback loop, where less forest, less wildlife would have less tourists will have less money, poorer people, and then the poor people would go and hunt more in the forest, and you are going into this negative feedback loop and then everything will wash into a drink. Not good and not good. Yeah. So anyway,
well,
so another thing
about the judicial process that you've just been going through. I know you've done that in the past before. You've done programs with the US Departments of Justice as well.
Yes.
So
yes.
what was different this time? Was there anything new that's been going on since you were last working with organizations similarly?
Yeah, so during that time, that workshop is actually trying to educate the judges,
Yeah,
try to introduce them, how important is wildlife, and therefore, when they come across any wildlife cases, they have to treat those wildlife cases seriously,
yeah,
and then give the heavy punishment on those people who are found guilty
yeah,
that the wildlife law. Obviously this country, the whole nations, the entire world is run by law from different countries, isn't it? But this is quite challenging because most of the times the local people are poor, and then in this part of the world, humans is always superior over wildlife or animals. So if the wildlife law are being treated equally as a human civil law, then there'll be no problem. Yeah, and many developed country like US have done that. That's why wildlife in most developed country are well protected. Yeah, and then the local people are aware and do not choose to break the law. All the hunters follow the regulations and so on and so forth. Yeah.
mm,
Yeah. Anyway, so and then another thing that I did a few days ago, I went to Tarbin, went to visit Tinam. So Tinam is she has been in the forest for more than 6 months now, and then she's doing good. She's still we're still walking her in the forest, getting bigger, getting body getting longer. I did not dare to get close, after last month incidents. So I just let them go and do their work because she
yeah.
is
So
aware
for
of
those people
stranger.
who don't know, Tenem is a sun bear who is a sun bear cub that's being soft released into the middle of the rainforest with carers looking after her, just as a background.
Yeah, so it is good to see that progress is ongoing. But again, the forest in Tabin, we have a lot of rains. Working condition is not good. It's quite challenging. It's not easy to work in that kind of environment. And right now, today we have a team of 5 people camping in the forest for about 8 to 9 days to go and change the uh, camera trap pictures. Yeah, and then to service the stations. Hopefully, they'll bring in a set of new interesting pictures. And then Elvia, the master student, is still continue doing her master in Tarbin and trying to trap sun bears. Right now, she already have opened the trap on, but right now only one trap for about 2 months now. Still have no luck on trapping any sun bear. So sun bear trapping is not easy. So the effort need to be increased and so on. And then as of the bears in the center, yeah, so far so good. We have one of our bear, Mama Thai, is undergo eye surgery just last week. We invite a vet ophthalmologist, Dr. Cheng, come to do the operation, and then Dr. Woon will write up about that procedure, that operations soon. Yeah. So we have
It's been a
eye
lot on.
surgery. Yes, it's always a lot of stuff going on. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, well
Okay.
done. Thank
Mm-hmm.
you. Thank you so much for that. Is there anyone who has questions for Wong?
Okay. Nope. Move on.
You sure? Okay, last chance. Well, I think it actually segues very well to our guest speaker, because one of the things that talking about poaching, Wong, was that last time I was in Borneo you took me to the fish market at Sandakan, and it was one of the things that was absolutely it was abhorrent to see the amount of sea life that was being killed on a daily basis. Um, and one of those was manta rays, all kinds of rays
Yeah.
being killed. So wildlife poaching is not just on land. Wildlife poaching is all over
Yeah.
Asia, isn't it?
And
So,
the biggest scale is on sea every day.
Yeah.
every day. Can you imagine, how many fishing port, how many fishery market, you name it. We consume a lot of sea life. It's
Mm,
amazing the amount of sea life that we haul out from the sea. And obviously, today's speaker will tell us more about it. And
yeah.
then yeah, so seeing those manta ray, eagle ray, cowtails, you name it, there's so many species of rays. Here in Borneo, there are like what, 52 species of rays.
Oh, there are that
Uh,
many. Wow.
yeah, and then and haul up, in the market, and it was really heartbroken.
Yeah, it is. So let's have a positive spin on Project Manta and move over to Asia. I'd like to share my screen just for a moment, and tell you just a little bit about this place. This is Lady Elliot Island. It's an island on the southern end of the Great Barrier Reef, and you have to take a plane to get there. So last month, I flew to Lady Elliot just on a day trip and spent some time with Dr. Asia. Um, Learning about manta rays, swimming on that incredible coral reef there, and actually got to see a manta ray, which was an absolute delight, I have to say. Here's a manta ray close up. It's not one that I took, but she's going to tell us all about some of the incredible species, or incredible individuals of this species that she's met. So thank you so much, and welcome, Dr. Asia.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks, Dr. Wong, as well, for the introduction there. So before I share my screen, I thought I've got a bit of a presentation to share, but as soon as I share my screen, I won't be able to see any of your lovely faces. So I thought before I do that, I might just gauge with the audience, like, who has seen manta rays before? Sarah, you don't count anymore.
I don't care. Okay.
Okay, so there's a few people hopefully alive. So yeah, I am going to tell you everything you ever wanted to know about manta rays, probably more than you ever wanted to know about manta rays, in a very rapid fire presentation. I often give this presentation in about 40 or 50 minutes. I'm going to do it in about 20 or 25 minutes. So I will talk fast. People, yes, it can be difficult to stop me talking about manta rays. I'm quite passionate about these animals. So I will give you a bit of a background about their biology and ecology, a little bit of a background about the work of Project Manta, and yeah, then there's time for questions too, I believe. And I also think in this forum, it's informal. You are welcome to unmute yourself and just ask me a question in the middle of my talk if there's a slide and you're interested, or if you want to refute something I say, whatever you like. I'm happy to be interrupted, is what I'm trying to say. So I'll share my screen now. And launch this presentation. So hopefully you can see that now. So yeah, so Project Manta is a university-based research project. So we're based at the University of the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, Australia, and we've been around since about 2007. And when Project Manta first started, it was at a time when there was very little known about manta rays globally. Research was in its infancy, despite the fact that they're quite a large animal. But since that time, in the last couple of decades, there really has been quite a lot that we've learnt. But you can ask me pretty much any burning question and I'll probably say we still don't know. So there's still heaps that we don't know about these animals as well. So I'll launch straight in with what they are. So manta rays are cartilaginous fish. So they're part of the group, the chondrichthyans, the sharks and rays, which cartilaginous means they don't have bone. Their skeleton's made of cartilage. And yeah, they're part of the ray side of that broader group, but they don't have a stinging barb like other stingrays do. So they lost that in their evolutionary history. And instead they are quite a large ray, they have quite a bit of speed, and so they don't really need that barb for defense, whereas like the ray that you can see on the left-hand side here, that ray is more of a benthic ray, spends a lot of time on the sand, and the barb in its tail there helps defend it if something comes up from behind to attack it. So yeah, that's a bit of a distinction for those guys. Now, they're part of the family, the Mobulidae. So the Mobulidae are the devil rays or the Mobula rays and the manta rays. And so there's about 11 species that belong to this family. I say 11 with a bit of a question mark because taxonomists like to mess with this and change things on us. But I think we're sitting at 11 that's been decided now. Plus or minus one at times, depending on what they say. But so there's 2 species of manta rays and then 9 species of devil rays or Mobula rays. And if you've seen these guys in the water, or hopefully not too many in the fish markets, the devil rays tend to be a bit smaller than the manta rays, and they have their mouth on the ventral surface of the body, so they're quite easy to distinguish between the two. And their wingtip to wingtip size tends to be more around that 1 meter mark, or the larger ones can grow up to 3 meters. But for the manta rays, the 2 species that we've got, Mobula alfredi on the right-hand side, or the reef manta ray, and the Mobula birostris on the left-hand side, the oceanic manta ray, these ones can grow for the reef manta ray up to 5 meters from wingtip to wingtip, so they're a very big animal. And the oceanic manta ray upwards of 7 meters from wingtip to wingtip. So quite a big beast to come across in the water, but as I said, no spine on their tail, and they are quite a gentle animal. So you can tell the difference between these guys in the water as well. The oceanic manta ray has those really solid white bars on its shoulders, and the reef manta ray, I like to say it has a bit of a kind of indistinct love heart kind of shape on its back, so you can tell the difference between them when you look at their dorsal surface. And then underneath as well, the oceanic manta rays have that kind of dark patterning along the trailing edge of their pectoral fins, whereas that's not as apparent for the reef manta rays. And then there's that size as well that helps you tell the difference between them. Now, going back to the threats for these animals, unfortunately, both of these species are listed on the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species, the reef manta ray as vulnerable and the oceanic manta ray as endangered. So both of them are suffering population declines around the world, that if we don't change something, they are heading towards extinction. So if you are lucky enough to be in the water with them somewhere, you can tell the difference between the males and females. So like other sharks and rays, the males have external reproductive organs called claspers. That's the paired appendages at the base of the pelvic fins there. And the females don't have them. Their reproductive organs are internal. So you can, if you get up close and personal with them, you can tell the difference between the males and females. It can be a little bit more difficult when you're looking at an immature male because their claspers are quite small. So need to be paying close attention. And they have these unique birthmarks. So this is one of the really cool things for researchers, is that we can tell the difference between individuals in a really non-invasive way, where we can just take a photograph of an animal, get back to the computer and match that animal using photographic identification. And these spot patterns are lifelong, and it means that pretty much anywhere where manta rays turn up with any kind of regularity, there's people there collecting photo IDs of these animals and compiling these databases. And it's quite amazing what we can learn from this. So we can learn about their movements and the connectivity of populations. You know, you just need a photograph with the date and location, and then you get that same animal somewhere else, and you can kind of track it in that way. But then you can also see things like rates of injuries or types of injuries. You can see the growth rates, maturity rates, when a male goes from immature to mature, when a female exhibits mating scars or signs of pregnancy. You can track their reproduction. So all kinds of things just from collecting these photographs of the animals, which is quite amazing. And so I just wanted to go through a little bit of the behaviour if you've been lucky to observe manta rays. So one of the things that they do that is very good if you're a diver is they turn up at these cleaning stations on the reef. So they spend quite a bit of time just hovering above either coral or rocky bommies being cleaned by these cleaner wrasse. And so the cleaner wrasse are picking off ectoparasites or tending to wounds. And the manta rays can spend quite a considerable amount of time doing this, and they're very relaxed while they're doing it, and they readily allow people to approach them, which is fairly lucky. Most sharks and rays that do attend cleaning stations won't stay around once humans come towards the cleaning station. So that's one of the things that I think is a big appeal for manta rays, is that they are quite readily approached. Another really cool thing to see with them is when they're feeding. So they feed on the microscopic zooplankton in the water, so the tiny animals, and they use those head fins or cephalic lobes as like a funnel around their mouth, and they open their mouth up really wide when there's enough zooplankton in the water. It needs to be a certain density before they'll do that, because it is energetically costly to swim around like a big funnel. So then they're sieving out all of that zooplankton out of the water column. And this is an incredible way to interact with them, because when they're feeding, they are just hungry mantas, and they couldn't care less about anybody else in the water. They're very distracted and on focused on what they're doing. And then something that's really cool to see is courtship behavior. So for manta rays, it's the female that leads the courtship behavior. She'll be out front, and there can be 2-3 males following behind her, and they'll be moving to try and get close to her and be the one that gets to follow her in pole position. And sometimes there can be up to 20 individuals following one female. And this can go on for weeks as well. And the movements will get ever more intricate until she finally decides on a mate. And when they do mate, they go belly to belly. So the male holds on to the female's left pectoral fin, always the left, using his mouth. So he's got they don't need teeth because they eat zooplankton, but they have like a bit of a sandpaper kind of rasping plate in their mouth. The male will hold on to the female's left pectoral fin. They will mate, and then they go separate ways. So this was a really lucky capture by someone at Lady Elliot with a drone. They sent it up and caught this mating behavior. This has only been observed about 5 times in the wild. So most of what we know about their reproduction comes from captivity, from aquarium. Very little's known from wild populations. So you might have an idea which one was the female in that interaction when they when they went their separate ways. And so the females are at least 10 years old when they're sexually mature, the males as well. And then when they come together and mate, you can see the example there of the mating scars that are left on the female's left pectoral fin. And then in the top right, you can see that's what the pregnant manta ray looks like. So she goes from being this very flat pancake to like a big stuffed ravioli by the end of the gestation period. And she's pregnant for 12 to 13 months and only has 1 pup after that time. And when that pup comes out, it's rolled up like a bit of a burrito, comes out, it's already 1.2 to 1.5 meters disc width when it's born. And we believe there's no parental care after that point. It's already a fully formed manta ray. But that's another question mark. We don't see babies in the wild. So it's a little bit of an unknown where they spend those really early years. I've seen thousands of manta rays and only seen maybe two that I think were babies. So yeah, it's globally, no one really knows where the babies are hanging out. But yeah, they only produce every 2 to 3 years, so very low reproductive output for these guys. So then moving on to the less enjoyable part of the talk, so talking about the threats to these animals. So there's some cryptic or indirect threats, such as an unmanaged tourism, when you can get a lot of people turning up to interact with one animal, and you can have excessive numbers of boats in the water. You can have a lot of divers or snorkelers disturbing the habitat, disturbing the behavior of the animal. Things like microplastics are emerging as quite a threat to them. You know, they're sieving that zooplankton out of the water and obviously taking in a lot of microplastics at the same time. A study from Indonesia showed that manta rays are ingesting something like 63 pieces of plastic an hour or something of feeding. But this photo on the bottom right there is as just an example of zooplankton in a lab that ingested plastics, dyed plastics, and they were doing this experiment to see if the zooplankton would accumulate it or would process it. And actually they just bioaccumulate it, so they don't process it. It doesn't leave their system. And so the zooplankton that are consuming the microplastics are then being consumed by the manta rays. So the bioaccumulation for those higher order predators is huge. And we know from other species that this can affect things like fitness. That hasn't been tested in manta rays specifically at this stage. Another risk for these animals can be marine debris in the environment. So this is an example of a manta ray that some divers found, and it had a float and rope tied around its cephalic lobe. So we think it might have swum into a crab pot. And it's got wrapped up in that rope, and it has obviously been on there for a while because it's really tight around the skin, and it looks like the manta probably would lose that cephalic lobe. It's really cut in very deeply there. Unfortunately for Grumpy Dave, that's the manta's name, this was in 2014 and we haven't seen him since. So hopefully he's still out there. 10 years for a manta is nothing. So, you know, chances are he could still be out there somewhere. We do have mantas in our population that are missing cephalic lobes, and we see them year after year, and they seem like they're healthy, but it likely does reduce that zooplankton intake, not having their solid funnel. But yeah, it's quite an incredible thing watching an animal this size hovering with such trust there with the diver and allowing the diver to work away that rope. And this is quite a common thing for these animals. So they'll turn up at places entangled in fishing line, and they'll hover in front of people waiting to be cleaned, like we're big cleaner fish. It's quite an interesting thing. So we might be putting the thing in the ocean, but they also expect us to take it out, which is interesting. So another threat for these species is boat strike. So this is an example from the Maldives of a manta ray called Baba Ganoush that turned up there. This is a few years ago now, and it was right at the end of their season in this particular area that runs from May to November. And it turned up in that left-hand photo there, just missing the whole back of its body. And they watched it swim away, and they thought they'd never see it again. And then the start of the next season, it turned up fully healed. So that's the photo on the right-hand side. So likely it's lost the chance of being reproductively viable now, but it's still alive. And so it does show this incredible capacity that they have to heal. Bit of a content warning on the next one. So those were the cryptic or indirect threats. This is the more direct targeted threat for these animals. So fisheries in general with bycatch and artisanal fisheries are a risk to these animals, but the targeted fisheries for them are largely targeted for their gill plates. For use in traditional Chinese medicine is the thing that's really driven their population declines in the last 15 years. some areas they've registered declines of 88% in over a decade in certain populations. So these animals, as I said before, they are very late age of maturity, very low reproductive output. And so these kind of targeted threats are just not sustainable for these species. But one of the cool things, and this goes to what Dr. Wong was saying before, is that in some areas, so they've done economic studies on these species that show a manta ray alive is worth $1 million, a dead manta ray is worth $400. So in some places, when that study was released looking at those economics, some places like Indonesia overnight announced protection for manta rays throughout the archipelago. How that's enforced is another thing, but there is a lot of on-the-ground work trying to replace livelihoods from a number of conservation organisations, trying to move away from fisheries and towards tourism and things like that that are more sustainable for everybody, as well as for the animals into the future. So yes, there's definitely good work afoot to try and reverse what has been done. And so our team is involved in these efforts. So we're quite fortunate in Australian waters in that we don't have the directed or targeted threats to these animals. So we do have those indirect ones. We still have bycatch. We have issues with shark control programs and the animals getting tangled in nets and things like that. But we don't have those directed pressures. And so what we have here is what could be considered more stable population or a more natural population. And so we can do research to investigate key parameters of the species biology and ecology to then help inform conservation efforts in other places as well. So we've done a lot of genetic works looking at connectivity, population sizes. We've done a lot of tagging, looking at broad scale movements, fine scale tracking, looking at their habitat use. So I won't go into too much detail about any of that, but I can, you're more than welcome to ask any questions. But yeah, so just an example, we've been doing some satellite tagging recently, and we've been using these fast lock GPS tags. So you can see that animal there has that tag floating above it. So they're on a towed tether, which means when the animal comes near the surface, when that tag breaks the surface, it's equipped with a GPS aerial, which gives us really fine scale tracking information. So previous satellite tags for marine tracking, you had really coarse resolution, like up to 100 kilometers area where you could think the animal might be, but now it's GPS technology. It's like your phone, you know, it's within 10 meters of where it says it is when it's on the surface. So we get these really fantastic tracks to actually understand where the animals are going and what areas are important to them. So this is just an example of one of those tracks. So we tagged the animal at Lady Elliot Island. The tag stayed on for 100 days. We tagged it in winter time, so during the peak of their aggregation around the island, and it stayed on until September, where you can see that it's starting to make that southern migration, which we observe over the summertime with animals moving down into cooler waters as the warmer water pushes south. And you can see there's just a bit of a depth profile as well, where you can see that the animal does these repeated dives to around that 50-meter mark. And we notice that that happens in the evenings when they go and do deep diving at depth at nighttime, accessing the vertically migrating zooplankton. Yeah, and that animal in the 100 days covered about 1,700 kilometers. So from these tags, we get this incredible kind of picture about what places are important to them, where they're going, and yeah, what depths they're accessing as well. Okay, so moving on to a couple of examples of some cool discoveries from our work. So going back to the photo identification work that we do. So on the east coast of Australia, we've identified over 1,600 different reef manta rays. And from those 1,600 animals, we've had about 10,000 sightings that have been confirmed via photo ID. And yeah, the database spans from about 30 degrees latitude in the south all the way up to the Torres Strait in the north. And in case you didn't know, here's something exciting. Pink manta rays are real. or at least one pink manta ray is real. So a number of years ago, we had this male manta ray turn up at Lady Elliot Island, and somebody sent us the photo of it, and we were a little bit dubious and wondered who he was. And then we were lucky enough to be in the water with him when we were collecting some genetic samples, and my colleague took a sample of him, and that is the little skin plug there, the little muscle tissue sample on a white piece of paper. So you can see he actually is highlighter pink. It's not just a trick of the light underwater. And then if you get some strobes on him, he really is quite bright. So we think that it is just a case of a genetic mutation in the melanin production where he has this rosy hue, but we haven't been able to confirm exactly the mechanism for that yet. But he gets a lot of attention. And then we have this manta ray who is Taurus. He's number 134 in our database, and he's who I like to call the grandfather of manta rays. So the image on the left there was taken in 1982, and if you look closely, you can see he was a mature male in that image. So we know he was at least 10 years old then. And then the image on the right is an image I took last year of him. So we know he's at least in his early 50s, possibly older than that, which is pretty cool. So he's the record holder for longevity for manta rays, but he could be, as I said, much older than that. But it is a great example of how these images collected from citizen scientists can really inform these important life history parameters for these species. So the thing that those findings have in common is that we got that information through citizen science submissions. And so then I know that you guys are based all over the world, here, there, and everywhere. But I'll still do a little plug and say we want you to submit your data to us as well. So if you know, all the people that put up their hands at the start and said they've seen manta rays, it doesn't have to be this part of the world. We're connected to our global collaborators everywhere. If you have photographs of bellies of manta rays, we would love to see them. You can submit them to us, or there's online platforms, Manta Matcher, ID the Manta, in all different parts of the world to contribute to this kind of science.
Asia, would it be any use if they were dead mantas? Would that be useful to you to know that some have been killed or something?
Yep. So a few years ago, we had a manta ray wash up on a beach, actually, and we believe it had died in a shark net a bit further south from here, and we were able to identify it as one of our manta rays from our database, and it was number 17 in our database. It had been first added almost 20 years ago, and then perished in the shark control program. And it was useful because it meant that we could then actually have a deceased category in the database to say, well, we know that one is gone. Whereas most of the time we can have 23 years between sightings, and then the animal will turn up and we'll go, oh, okay, great. We don't know where you've been or anything like that, but we know you're still alive. Whereas, it does allow you to put a line in the sand. So certainly if people have photographed the bellies of manta rays, then they can be used as well. Yeah, for sure. For the Australian populations, if you submit one to us and it's new, you get to name it. I'm sure other people have similar incentives. But yeah, with that, I'll just say thank you all for listening to more than you ever wanted to know about manta rays, I'm sure. And I'll open it up for any questions if people had any.
That was, you managed to get it all in. Well done.
I know, I just went over 25.
Oh, amazing. And look at that to finish on. How incredible is that?
So yeah, that's an example of courtship behavior. A bit of cleaning. I think the female's trying to get a clean, but
this is amazing. Well done. Extraordinary work. Okay, who's got questions for Dr. Asia?
maybe I go first.
Over it, Wong.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. Okay, Dr. Asia, just now you show the range of the manta ray on the map, and then how far can a manta travel, or how big is the home range? How much of a forest? How much of a ocean that they need in average that they roam?
It's so funny that you ask that question because that's one slide that I hid from the talk when I was trying to condense it a bit. I took out one of our movement slides. So for the most part, I believe early on in manta ray research, it was assumed that they were ocean basin crossers. You know, people thought they made these really big movements. But certainly the reef manta rays, they have really small home ranges, like within a few hundred kilometers. Straight line distances will be all they'll move. The oceanic manta rays do move a bit further, and there's less known about some of their broader scale movements as well. But yeah, we recorded a few years ago a manta ray making a movement from the southern, southern Queensland up towards Townsville, which was a distance of 1,100 kilometres. And that far and away exceeded any straight line movements that any had made globally at that stage. So previously, the record holder had moved about 600 kilometres in one distance. We don't know how far they go in between, if you know what I mean, but straight line, 1,100 kilometres is the current record holder for a reef manta ray, straight line distance. So yeah, relatively small for the size of the animal, and certainly not crossing ocean basins. Their populations are quite structured. The manta rays on the east coast of Australia are not connected to the ones, off the coast of Borneo, and so on. Yeah.
Awesome. Good question. Who else has got one?
I have another one.
Go on.
Well,
You're on a roll.
yeah. Okay, so right now everybody is talking about, global climatic change, global warming, coral bleaching, and things like that. And presumably, that would affect, say, for example, plankton populations. And then for manta rays so far, what would be the immediate or the things that you have seen change and this kind of coral bleaching, global climatic change affect their survivals and or their population?
Yeah, so I think one of the first signs that there could be trouble is in the prey distributions. So the zooplankton, like the study that's been done around zooplankton distribution, is showing that the larger bodied zooplanktons we already know are more concentrated in the polar regions. And manta rays, for example, are quite thermally constrained. They can't really go into that colder water. So they're really relying on these very ephemeral patches of dense zooplankton in tropical waters that don't have these larger bodied zooplankton at the same scales as polar waters do. And we're seeing that the tropical plankton is not producing the same levels of the higher lipid content, larger bodied zooplanktons as previous. Those are shifting into cooler waters already, and they're not blooming in the same quantity that they previously did in tropical waters. So that's potentially going to create a real issue for them. They don't necessarily discriminate on what size zooplankton they're eating in a swarm, but they certainly do seem to target plankton that is of a higher volume. So when those big plankton go, I don't know that they're going to be able to meet their energetic requirements on the smaller bodied animals that are left. So that is a concern. Another concern with things like coral bleaching or ocean acidification is what's happening to the reefs themselves. And we already know that those are an important habitat for these species in terms of cleaning stations. They show really high site fidelity to the same reefs that they return to time and time again for cleaning. So likely if we see a lot of degradation in those reefs, they're going to have to shift their habitat use. No one's really quantified how important cleaning is to body maintenance for these animals. Whether they just shift to another reef that hopefully still has the cleaner fish variety or density that they need. Yeah, it's a bit of a question mark, but we certainly know they are quite resident to these reef environments and do use them really regularly. So likely coral degradation is not going to be great for this species either. So yeah, it's all still a little bit of a question mark, really. We think, sorry?
There's a lot to learn.
Yeah, there is definitely. We think, I mean, locally here, we think we have observed increases of animals moving towards the south of their distribution. So with that warmer water pushing south for longer during the summer times, we think that they could already be exhibiting a little bit of a southern extent range shift on their distribution, but it's quite difficult to quantify because our research efforts are patchy, and so we rely a lot on that citizen science input, which is not stable. It varies and fluctuates a lot. It's very opportunistic, and so any inferences we make, I always try to do it with caution rather than saying it with too much confidence.
Yeah. Yeah, good question.
Kat, I think your daughter wanted to ask a question, maybe.
Do stingrays, manta rays, need to come up to the surface to breathe?
That's an awesome question.
Well
so like other fish, they use their gills to respire, so they don't need to come to the surface to breathe. So unlike dolphins or whales, like mammals, they need oxygen from air to respire and send oxygen around their bodies. Fish are capable of getting that from the water, so they use their gills to get the oxygen. And that really does make our research more complicated because non-air breathers are just much harder to access. We're very lucky with manta rays because they like feeding on the surface. So a lot of times zooplankton will be concentrated in these kind of tidal slicks or current slicks on the surface, and it'll be really close to the surface. So the mantas will come up right on the surface, so that allows us to get those pings from their satellite tags and things like that. If they didn't do that, the satellite tagging efforts would be a lot less successful.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're quite fortunate in that way. And also because they do all this deep diving at night, we actually think they use these shallow reef environments as a little bit of a way to thermoregulate. So to help recover from the cold deep diving they do at night, they kind of warm up on the reef in those shallow protected waters. So we're very fortunate that they tolerate us approaching them when they're feeding and cleaning in shallow water. Otherwise, we'd known a lot less about them.
That was a great question. Well done.
I've just seen that Peter asked a question in the chat. Photo of zooplankton with ingested plastic, horrifying, should be shown globally to try to curb our... Yeah. I completely agree with you. I do think it's one of those things as well that we need to be pressuring our governments with a lot more, because I think it's a really great trick that they've done to make us feel solely responsible for all the waste in the world. But really at the corporate level, if these changes could be made, rather than it being just the consumer's responsibility. It should be at the corporation and industry level that we reduce plastics, and consumers obviously do
It's a
their
good point
part.
you make there, Asia, isn't it? Because we don't tend to measure fishing waste. We don't measure nets and things like that to the extent that they destroy wildlife.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, putting the onus on the companies to reduce their plastic packaging and everything like that, you know, we as consumers are trying our best to, well, a lot of us are trying our best to reduce the plastic that we bring home, but it's very difficult to avoid if at the industry level they're still pumping it out. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yep, go for it, Peter.
I just come off traveling through 7 countries, and the Western fellow travellers, the amount of plastic they wasted was sickening. I used to go out and buy a 20 litre bottle of water to put in the van so we could share it, otherwise they go out and get 0.5s. What I'd like to see is similar to the cigarette packets on every single bottle or whatever, a health warning, because if we're going to eat this stuff, we are eating it. But people just don't seem to get it at all. They think I'm on another planet. When I lugged 2 of these bottles to the van, they said, "What the hell are you doing?" I said, "Come on, guys, you know, there's 16 of us. We don't need to be buying 0.5 litre bottles of water. It's just crackers." But it's when I saw that picture of that zooplankton, I had no idea. I knew there was a problem, but it's horrific, really horrific.
Yeah. Well, and I think a study came out last year that went through all the different food products that you just wouldn't even assume. You know, I feel like we've been hearing it for years that your fish have got plastics in it and things like this. But we're talking rice, like grains of rice are being grown in fields full of microplastics as well. And so every level of food production has got plastics or the products of plastics, the PPEs and everything all through it. Like it's one of those topics that is mind-boggling and extremely depressing, to be honest. Like it's one of those overwhelming things that you feel
time, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, thank you for that amazing talk. Obviously I've spent some time with you and I know quite a lot of the stuff that you've talked about, but it's just mind-blowing, especially your footage. It's just incredible to see that footage of such majestic beasts. I think everyone totally agrees with me on that one. I'd love to everyone give Asia a really big round of applause for such an amazing talk. That was wonderful.
Thanks everyone.
We'd love to have a couple of minutes to finish off and see what everyone else has been doing too. So well, we know we've got a few, haven't we? Kat, you guys are heading off to Magnetic Island. When do you go?
Yeah, we're heading off on Tuesday, hopefully, to Magnetic Island. So we'll connect with Ali and Izzy B at the Koala Hospital and do lots of bushwalking and koala spotting.
Sounds fantastic. Hope it goes well.
Yeah, thank you. We can't wait.
Yeah, excellent. Wenbin, would you like to tell us a little bit about the finishing of your project?
For the past few months, I've been working with Dr. Wong and BSBCC on a series of signage for them. It's as part of my final project for the MA I'm doing in the UK now. And also, thank you, Dr. Sarah, for your help in tracking the writing.
That's all right. I can't wait to see it. They look absolutely incredible. You haven't got any pictures you can share, do you? Or you?
Let me bring them out.
This is a global reveal.
The file is a bit big.
The file's too big.
Yeah, so sometimes it doesn't open.
That's all right. If it doesn't, that's all right. You can save it for another time.
Yeah. Maybe I'll collect them together at some point, and then that'll be easier.
Great.
Yeah.
If you can show us maybe next time or something, that'd be great. Thanks, Wenbin, and well done for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Claire, have you been doing anything special? Oh, you're on mute at the moment. Still on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, I'm on my phone, so I couldn't find the button. Well, I was at BSBCC in May, and that was really good because I was there for 12 days, and so it was good to work with Along, Angry Bear, and see him really chilled out, and
Yeah, has he
also
improved?
he did improve briefly. He actually he was walking around really slowly, and he was really mellow, and he was like quite uninterested in everything that was going on around him. So that was like a real breakthrough. That was like,
Yeah.
we could really see that big difference. And then we were helping Kukaton and Kwong with going out into the forest enclosure, because they were a little bit reluctant, so their confidence wasn't as high as some of the other bears, and I do believe that after I left, Kukaton has broken ground and was digging in the forest floor. So it was a really interesting trip, and I spent a long time with Amiko as well, and it was good to see him relaxing and yeah, actively choosing the essential oils, which was really interesting to see. It was like they made a conscious choice of, oh, this can support me. So yeah, I can't wait to get back and see what the next visit holds.
Oh, well done.
Thank
you. All right, I'm saving Spencer's news to last. Is there anyone else who has something to share before we ask Spencer to give us his big news? No? Spencer, are you still there?
Hi, Sarah. 1 second.
There you are. Tell us what you've been up to, young man.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Sarah. Hi, Asia as well. Oh, it's fantastic to hear you talk, Asia. I love mantas, and I remember watching Bushwhacked, and Project Manta was there on Bushwhacked, so that was pretty cool. Yeah, so when I found out you were talking here, I was really excited. So my big news is I've just been down to meet Jane Goodall in Sydney. So I was asked in October last year if I would like to meet Jane Goodall, and that was pretty incredible when I was asked. And then I got to go down in June, just last month, to meet Jane Goodall. I presented to her at my a table, so it was really intimate, and I got to show her all my boards and some of the glossy feathers and all of the different things that I've got, some of my photographs, my calendar, my glossy socks. And then I got to ask Jane a question in front of all of these youth leaders and mini grants groups as well in the auditorium of Taronga Zoo's Institute of Science and Learning. So that was pretty amazing.
What did you ask her, Spencer?
I asked Jane, I'm trying to remember now, do you think habitat protection is the most important thing we can do to stop biodiversity loss and mitigate the impacts of climate change?
Good question.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
how did she answer?
Yeah, so Jane answered by saying that obviously poorer countries, like, these areas that people are poorer, like, Borneo, like those sort of areas that Wong's been trying to protect as well, we need to be looking after the people so that they can protect their forests. But obviously Australia, we don't have that problem here of, people have to destroy forests because they're too poor. So we don't have that issue. So really what Jane, really the message that came across really to everyone was that we don't have that issue, and that means that we need to stand up for nature, and we can all stand up for nature, really. Yeah. So that was pretty incredible. And then I got to visit many different places on the way back to Noosa. I got to visit the Great Koala National Park, which is under threat at the moment. They're logging that as we speak. And I got to visit Wallam at Brunswick Heads. I've been helping them protect their amazing habitat, and they have just won their court injunction as well. So they've stopped the works at that site, which is pretty amazing. That's great news.
Yeah,
So,
that's fabulous.
Yeah, so that's pretty amazing. I've been helping to gather some information about sightings for there as well. So, yeah, that's really what
You've been a busy young man.
Yeah, and then I've got World Stand Up for Nature Day on the 9th of September, so that's coming up as well. So
Okay.
I'm really excited for that. Yeah.
Well done. Well done. And keep doing what you're doing, Spencer.
Yeah, thank you.
Don't forget that if any of the people here can help you, we will.
Yeah, definitely. That's fantastic. And thank you for all your support you've given me, Sarah, and everyone as well. Thank you.
That's all right. I think that's a really, really good note to end on, don't you think? We've got to end with a bit of hope. And yeah, we don't want to end on a negative note. So that's a really good one to end on. So thank you everyone for being here this month. Thank you so much, Asia, for this incredible talk about mantas, and they're such incredible species. So thank you. And thanks, Wong, for your
thank you
update.
all so much. Sarah, thank you for inviting me, and thank you all for everything I've learnt from you as well. Spencer, you're the most inspiring person I've met in a long time. Thank you.
Isn't it? Absolutely. Now, next month will be, we always meet on the 10th of each month. I'm hoping that all of you will be here again. Next month, we won't have a guest speaker because I'll be in Borneo with Wong, and we'll have a joint, joint chat with me, Wong, and some of the people I'm taking to Borneo. So we want to hear what some of their thoughts are once they've actually been in the rainforest, and hear from them. So this is the time that we've got for next time. It'll be a late one. It sort of works for most people around the world next month, so that's quite good. So 9 p.m. in Malaysia, 11 p.m. in Brisbane if you stay up that late, and various times around the world. So take a note of that. I'll be emailing each of you with those times a bit closer to the time as well. So thank you so much for being here. It's lovely to see all your smiling faces. See you again soon.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
See ya.